Welcome to day one of the 2018 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference and to the Bill James Room presented by the Action Network. My name is Sam Fetter, and I'm a first-year MBA student here at MIT Sloan and the student lead on Top Shelf with Gary Bettman and Jeff Vinik. It's my pleasure to introduce this panel's distinguished speakers. Starting on your left, Jeff Vinik is owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Gary Bettman is commissioner of the National Hockey League. And the panel will be moderated by Elliot Friedman, who's a broadcaster for Sportsnet. The panel runs 40 minutes, with 5 minutes at the end dedicated to Q&A. We encourage you to participate in Q&A, and to do so, please tweet your question using the hashtag TopShelf. Questions or tweets with the most mentions will be selected by Elliot during the Q&A process. Without any further ado, Elliot, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to get right started. And you know, when the commissioner's been around 25 years, you're always looking for information on him that you don't know previously. And it's hard because...
Intentionally so.
Yes, because he intimidates the owners and they don't like to say anything about him.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it.
And one of the things...
That's how I get a bad reputation.
No. One of the things they say about you is that you are a fearless cold caller. You are unafraid to pick up the phone and call someone and say, would you be interested in owning an NHL team? Is that how you came across Jeff Vinik?
Whoa, wait a minute. I'm not even sure how to answer that question. It's not about being a fearless cold caller. There's a network of people in this world who want to own sports teams, and in particular hockey teams. Jeff and I coincidentally knew somebody in common.
Okay.
And this person said, I would like to introduce you to this person who has a very good reputation and is the type of person you'd want to own one of your clubs. Mm-hmm. You may not have anything of interest for him right now, but I'd like to bring him up to introduce him to you. Mm-hmm. He brought Jeff up. We had a nice conversation for an hour or so. The good news is he'll be able to tell you whether or not I've got this story right, at least from his standpoint. And it was clear to me that he wanted to own a team. He was a passionate hockey fan. He's from Boston. Mm-hmm. Bruins weren't for sale. And we talked about things he might be interested in, cities he might want to live in. And shortly thereafter, he'll say 20 minutes, I'll say maybe a month. I said, listen, there's an opportunity for ownership in Tampa. Needs a lot of work, but it's a good fixer-upper. And after that, as they say, the rest is history, because he's actually Exhibit A as to the difference ownership can make, because this is one of our great franchises now, both on and off the ice, and it was all started with ownership.
Commissioner is right. No, that's exactly right. We had a great lunch, and we stayed in contact over the subsequent weeks. I think that lunch was probably in the spring, something like that.
Very expensive lunch, ultimately.
For me, yes.
No.
And it got more expensive as we kept talking. But you know, I definitely wanted to buy a team. I love hockey, love sports. You know, I'm a small partner in the Red Sox, but my Red Sox partners were very surprised that actually hockey is my first love. Used to watch, when I was 5 years old, games on a TV this big. My parents thought I was reading. I was watching hockey games. But anyway, I had a great meeting with Gary and, you know, met a lot of people in the league and got educated. And pretty soon I owned the Tampa Bay Lightning. And no question, it was a fixer-upper. You know, I was able to bring in great people. Steve Yzerman as GM, Todd Leiweke as CEO at the time, Steve Griggs, current CEO. They've done a tremendous job, and I give them all the credit for getting us where we are.
You know, it's interesting, because as you were asking the question and I was laughing, there's this perception of some in the media, particularly in colder climates, that somehow there was this magic trick I could pull every time I needed a new owner. And that was just a function of A, the desirability of owning a hockey team, and B, having a good network of prospective owners.
Well, you know, and being somebody who works in a colder climate that the commissioner is referring to, I do think that actually is one of the things that you have done best over your tenure, is that there are times we have said, there is no way you are going to find someone, and you always find someone. And the cold calling thing, I think, is a compliment, because I know a lot of people are afraid to pick up a phone and make a call.
But it's not really cold calling. It's people that I know. It's people that have expressed an interest to me. It's not like I go. It's not like when you see the boiler room in these movies for stock brokerage firms where you're calling people saying you have a good tip on stock. These are all people that I know want to be in sports.
And by the way, there are 130 professional sports franchises in the U.S. in the top 4 sports. Yeah, let's add MLS on top of that. Who wouldn't want to be an owner of a sports team if they're fortunate enough to be in that position? And if you love hockey, this is just a dream come true, and I've enjoyed every day of it, and will continue to.
Is it better than you thought it would be?
It's fantastic. It's the best thing. I can't imagine not doing this until the day I die.
Another satisfied customer.
Always. Like I talked about with the commissioner, Jeff, I made some phone calls about you. And one of the stories that I was told was the players in Tampa believed that you had a chance to be a good owner when you bought the team. Now, previously, the players in Tampa had complained to the ownership about the Zambonis. They said, we have the worst Zambonis in the league, and our ice is always terrible. And it's a reason we're not as good as we could be and not as entertaining a product as we could be. And the first thing I heard you did was you spent $200,000 on new Zambonis. And the players told me that's when they thought that it had a chance to work with you.
Can you imagine? I thought that a professional NHL team should have Zambonis that work. That's why they call me a visionary.
The other one I heard about you that was really interesting was that when you changed, like you spent a lot of your own money upgrading the arena there, which is owned by the authority.
Yeah.
When they were picking new seats to put in the buildings, I guess you ripped all the seats out and put them in, that you and your wife were the 2 people who tested the seats to make sure they were comfortable. Is that correct?
We did, and actually she did, and I did. And we actually went with the more expensive seat. It was like 10% more expensive because it was more comfortable. One of the regrets, maybe, now I'm questioning this as one of the regrets after buying the team. What didn't we do right? Our building had capacity of over 20,000 fans way back then when we bought the team. And we knew we had to reduce capacity. It was just a little big for the size of the market. And if we had made each seat 2 inches wider, fans would have been more comfortable, and we would have taken 1,500 seats out of the building. Having said that, we've now sold out 130 games in a row, so we're filling every one of those 19,092 seats.
Best decision you didn't make.
That's right.
Commissioner, when you search for an owner, what is important to you?
Well, there are a variety of factors. You want somebody who obviously has the resources to own a professional sports team, but you want somebody who is passionate about the game and somebody who's going to be a good partner in the league endeavor, somebody who's a smart businessman, somebody who's focused on the community and the importance that a sports team can have in the community and being a part of the community. And it all starts with ownership, and you have to check those boxes or it isn't going to work.
My grandmother had a saying. It was, you make plans and God laughs. And that's what she talked about. And everybody always has plans. You talk about community, and you came back from Florida this morning. They did something very special last night. Unfortunately and sadly, it's the second time this year the NHL has had to do that, Las Vegas and Florida. When you're in those moments and the team says we have to do a proper job of paying our respects, how involved are you, and how does the process work?
Well, I can't begin to discuss or to say how horrific the whole situation is in Parkland and was in Las Vegas. And you're right, it's the second time we've had to do that this season. And while I'm typically more articulate than this hits too raw a nerve, it's too emotional, it's too raw. We help the clubs. A club, it's not about creating an event, it's about the team being a part of the community and trying to help the community unify and heal. And even if either the Golden Knights in Vegas or the Panthers in South Florida help this much, it's something to help with that process. It's something to help the community move forward and again bring people together. And whether or not it's a blood drive, whether or not it's donations and fundraisers, these are all things that we work with the club with. We give them whatever assistance they want. Ultimately, it's up to the club because they're on the ground and this is their community. Unfortunately, we're getting too much experience in this. So I believe in this case, while our people from the league were on site and working with the Panthers, we and the Panthers were consulting with the Vegas organization and in Boston as well, what the Bruins did after the bombings at the Marathon. You know, sports leagues can be a source of comfort and help in tragic times. The problem is we're seeing too many of these tragic times. It's just horrific.
Jeff, you have a program in Tampa where every game you honor a local community leader.
Yep.
Where did that program come from?
We do. We're in our 8th year of our community hockey program. There is an independent committee that vets heroes in the community, philanthropic heroes. And they get $50,000 at each game to the hero, to the charity of their choice or charities of their choice. And this is, I think, from day one in terms of community, which is so important, so much of a part of the Lightning DNA. I think this community hero program has probably been the most important thing we've done. As I said, 8 years, $15 million. I believe Todd Leiweke came up with the idea. He says I came up with the idea, but we both knew it was an idea, and we get to celebrate that hero every game, take the second TV time out, put them up on the screen, tell their story, tell the story of the charity, and everybody gives a standing ovation every night. Again, that's where I get, emotional. We're at 298 heroes and $15 million right now.
This program, like so many that our other clubs do, Florida, Vinny Viola's doing it in Florida as well, this is where a sports team can make a difference in people's lives. And when you hear the stories of the community heroes, they're incredibly moving, and you see what a difference it can make. And when we were just in Tampa a month ago for All-Star, the connection, and we were there during Gasparilla, which is the pirate version of Mardi Gras, and it was an incredible weekend. But you could feel that the Lightning are a part of the very fiber of the community. We dedicated a rink at the Boys and Girls Clubs that had burnt down, that you and Penny have committed to renovating, and it's under construction. But everywhere you went, when you saw any indication of professional sports in greater Tampa Bay, it was all about the Lightning. And then at All-Star, the community hero at $100,000 was Willie O'Ree, who broke our color barrier 60 years ago last month. And he was the recipient, and to see him get a standing ovation from the 20,000 people that were in the arena was incredible.
We are, for those of you who are hockey fans, you're aware that we're 3 days away from the trade deadline. It's at 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday afternoon. And to be topical, I feel I should ask Jeff Vinik, what's your scouting report on Erik Carlson?
By the way,
Yeah.
tampering fines
I
are
know.
very expensive, so I'm listening very carefully.
Eric who?
Great answer.
You know
what the real answer is?
What's that?
Steve Yzerman is the answer.
Well, you know,
I let him do all this stuff.
that
I don't even know.
actually ties into the next question I wanted to ask you. Now in hockey, and that's the sport I primarily cover, the
Cover something else?
I used to, not very well, but I did. The managers will tell you as the businesses have become worth more and more, and these are multi-million-dollar businesses now and billion-dollar businesses in some case.
I hope so.
The owners are more involved than ever. You apparently are one of the exceptions of the rule. For example, Steve Yzerman in the Tampa setup, there's nobody between Steve Yzerman and Jeff Vinik. He reports directly to you. Many general managers or people who run the hockey operations report to someone and then the owner. How come you are hands-off in a business where so many owners are hands-on?
You know, different teams have different philosophies, just like all different businesses are run in different ways. Frankly, when 8 years ago when I bought the team, Todd Lywicki, CEO, Steve Yzerman as general manager, we had conversations about how this should be structured. I certainly learned a lot. And for us, the best way was for the business head, Todd, to report to me, and Steve to report directly to me. I'm a big believer in chain of command. I'm a big believer, I don't go in the locker room with the players a lot, or I don't tell the coach how to coach. I have discussions with the general manager. I don't even tell the general manager how to general manage. I, let him do his thing. We'll talk budget, we'll talk strategy, but let him do his thing. But for me and for the Lightning, you don't want me picking defensemen. You don't want me to pick draft picks. You want me to, be active in the community and hopefully be a good leader of the organization. But I don't get in the weeds.
In 25 years, how have you seen the role of ownership change in teams?
I'm not so sure. I mean, Steve Yzerman, any general manager, head of hockey operations, has to report to somebody.
Right.
The fact that he happens to report to the owner of the club as opposed to a CEO of the club doesn't mean that Jeff, as he said, micromanages. I think the biggest change you've seen, though, is there are a number of clubs that now have a general manager and a president of hockey operations. And I think that goes to philosophy. The theory being that a general manager is dealing with day-to-day, worrying about the next win and making the playoffs this year. And the theory is that the president of hockey operations should be having the long-term view, the long-term vision, and not letting the GM make short decisions or decisions in the short term that may have a long-term negative implication, because this is, all the sports leagues are very volatile businesses, and the coaches and managers worry about keeping their jobs, and they think they have to win today. And so inserting a layer of somebody who can take a step back and not deal with the day-to-day, I think the theory is structures an organization that's more long-term focused.
You asked the general managers at a meeting last year to think about where we're going to be in 10 years. Did you like the answers you got?
Well, I think the answers I got were fairly obvious. Our managers, I think our players and our coaches and our owners believe that the game has never been more competitive, more exciting, more entertaining. We have scoring's up, more lead changes, games are unpredictable. Every game in the regular season matters because teams are going to make or not make the playoffs by a point or two. And I think overall there's a great satisfaction with the game. What we talked about is, okay, what do we need to focus on for the long term to keep the game competitive? And we have, rooms full of people watching and critiquing and monitoring every game we play, looking for trends. But ensuring that the game is as safe as possible and as entertaining as possible, it has been and is the priority. And there were no great revelations. Nobody was sitting there saying, this is a fundamental flaw that has to be fixed. It's really more about continuing to monitor the game, tweak the rules where necessary, see how well technology can be blended into the game. And it's much more complicated than anybody thinks when you're dealing with replay issues. I mean, just ask the NFL and ask us on the issues we've had with goaltender interference. And the funny thing is, the managers will sit there and say, oh, just go to video replay, it'll be simple. You'll get the call right. Nothing is that simple.
Do you want it to stay?
Yeah, there's no choice. We have to do the best we can for our fans and for the game to, quote, get it right. But on something like goaltender interference, it's a judgment call. And whether or not I push you a little or a lot, whether the contact's incidental or more than incidental, you shouldn't be overturning calls that are made by the officials in real time unless you have a really good, compelling reason for doing it. And I think while it's worked beautifully on offsides, whether or not you like the offsides rules, a different story, and that's something we'll look at. But as it relates to goaltender interference, I think it was being overthought. And now that we've taken a little bit of a step back and clarified it, it's working better, and there's been a whole lot less controversy.
Do you like replay, Jeff?
I do.
One of the things I hear is that fans don't like it in the seats because it takes too long.
No, it
Do your
doesn't take
fans
that
tell
long.
you that? No?
No, I have not heard that. There's on average one replay a day.
They make stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, we're talking a minute a game, maybe 2 minutes a game on average. Let's get the calls right.
Well, but you raise a fair point, because particularly, and this was a conversation we've had with the officials, if it's going to take you 4 or 5 minutes to analyze a goaltender interference call, then it wasn't so obvious, and you should stick with the call on the ice. Let's not overthink it. The fans who don't like delays want us to get it right. And so take a minute and that's it. Sometimes you don't get the views, the replays that you want as quickly as you want. But typically it takes less than 2 minutes, probably a minute and a half. But again, you can't overuse it, and you can't officiate it, through replay. Our officials are the best officials in the world in hockey. So I think they're the best officials in all sports. It's hard to do, and overwhelmingly they get it right. I mean, I think we've had, 80 replays or challenges on offsides this season. No, actually 40, half of what we had last year at this time, 40 or 45. And on goaltender interference, it's probably about 120 out of, we've played somewhere close to 900 games. It's not that big a deal, and people want you to get it right.
One of the reasons I asked about the thing 10 years down the road is that you don't get to where the two of you are in life with being satisfied. You're always looking at the future. You talk about how you like where the game is, but there's no question you want it. There's another level that you would want it to go to, both of you. So what would you like to see?
But we've never hesitated to change the game when we thought it was appropriate. Change for a living, breathing game doesn't make sense. But during my term, we've gone to 2 referees, which was a revolutionary change. We got rid of the clutching and grabbing and hooking and holding. We changed the icing rule. We went to sudden death overtime and shootouts and 3-on-3. And so we're constantly tweaking and innovating, but the fundamentals of the game are sound. But that doesn't mean you just sit on it. You just continue to look at it and see what may or may not need to be tweaked. So, for example, this season, we cracked down on slashing. And had an impact of increasing goal scoring, not because of power plays. It's actually, even strength goals are up more than any other goals, but A, it kept players from getting injured, and B, it gave them better scoring opportunities because their hands weren't being slashed.
Business-wise, Jeff, is there anything that you would want to see over the next 10 years?
Well, non-business-wise, with all due respect to fellow owners in the room and the Boston community, I'd like to see 10 Stanley Cups in Tampa Bay.
You've got a good team.
Just a modest ask. I'd like to start with 1 at some point. But business-wise, I think it's fundamentals. We've got to keep our eye on technology and changes that are happening. We've got to keep our eye on media and changes that are happening with respect to that. But, I've never been that big a guy on looking 10 and 20 years ahead. I like to just, really analyze the cards as they come out of the deck and make the best decisions as you can, with some forward viewpoint, but not to, you don't want to go off track by having some grand vision.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about technology in a second, but Mark Lazarus of NBC was quoted this week in Sports Illustrated as admitting that the ratings were down in the Olympics without the NHL players there. Do you think in any way that helps your bargaining position going to China in 2022?
Well, a couple of points. One, I think their hockey ratings are down somewhere in the high 20, low 30% range. Not surprising, because it's not a best-on-best tournament. I know there's this perception out there that we were looking for some grand negotiation with either the Players Association or the IOC or the International Ice Hockey Federation. It wasn't about that. It was about the fact that we think it's too disruptive to our season. We are in the stretch drive now. Every game matters. We're getting ready. The trading deadline's coming up. We're getting ready for the last 300 games of the season. This is an exciting time. To have disappeared halfway around the world for 3 weeks doesn't do anything to enhance our game. And so at the end of the day, I'm sorry NBC's ratings are down, but it wasn't in our best interest. But also, analytics can be funny because I think Mark also said in the same article, well, it's also having a negative impact on us because 14 out of our 24 U.S. team regional local ratings were down. That happens, that's a misuse of analytics. Okay, first of all, to look at a 1 week period in the course of the season, the Olympics are apples to apples. Our schedule is apples to oranges, so you got to see who is playing and when. 4 of the teams that were down are not having great seasons under expectations, so that would be Chicago, Detroit, the Rangers, and Buffalo.
And those are big TV markets.
Okay, so they're not having great seasons.
Yep.
5 of the other remaining 10, give or take, not that I analyzed this too carefully, but I was, with all the things he has going on in South Korea, I was a little curious as to why he was focusing on local team hockey ratings, but okay. 5 of the teams, I think we're talking about a rating difference of 0.1% or 0.2 of a rating point. That made no sense. And the others, you have to look at the schedule because at least 3 or 4 at a quick look were out of time zone games. So for example, if the Kings were playing on the East Coast at 4:30 in the afternoon, and last year the same week they were playing, against San Jose in the same time zone. So it didn't make sense. I think it was not a great use of the data.
Okay, so let me follow it up with this. For NHL players to go to China,
Yes?
what do you want to see?
I don't know that we want to go to China. I don't know that we
You've got to want to go to China.
No, I think going to the Olympics is incredibly disruptive on our season. I was on a panel about 1.5 years ago with Adam Silver.
Yep.
And I said to him, I didn't know the answer, but I guessed it. I said, would the NBA shut down in the middle of the season to go to the Olympics? And he said, absolutely not. He didn't even let me finish the sentence. Baseball won't shut down to go to the Summer Olympics.
Right.
I've asked the IOC, I said, why don't you put us in the summer? You know, just for your history buffs, that the first participation of hockey in the Olympics was in 1920 in Antwerp in the Summer Games. Okay? We'd be happy to go in the summer. I'm sure the players would be thrilled to go in the summer. The middle of the season, where we disappear from the face of the earth, is incredibly disruptive, non-productive for our season. So this hasn't been a negotiating tactic with anybody. Now, the IOC and the IIHF made it a little easier because at one point they were saying, we're not going to even pay your expenses. And it costs for NHL part costs out of pocket, somewhere between 15 and 20 million between insurance and transportation and everything else. And their initial position is, we don't want to pay. And I said, don't worry about it. We don't want to go.
And have they reached out at all since?
No.
No?
By the way, I sent Renee Fizell, who runs the IIHF, an email saying, good luck, have a great tournament. And he said, thank you, I miss you. And I said, I miss you too, but not these 2 weeks.
Were there any emojis in those text messages or anything like
There are
that?
probably some smiles.
Okay. Jeff, one of the byproducts of having a talented team is you're going to have a lot of players who go. There's Stamkos, Hedman, Tyler Johnson. You have a lot of guys. Did they ever say anything to you about not being able to go?
Oh, to the Olympics. I thought you were talking.
that.
Yes. I thought you were talking about that we have to sign a lot of free agents. As these guys become free agents, we have to keep them. No, is the answer to me. They never brought it up. In this whole matter, just like Steve Yzerman's a great GM for us, et cetera. Gary, I let him do this stuff with the Olympics and all. I let him handle that. But, our players are playing as hard as ever. They are focused on this season. I've never heard a word about it.
But let's go to the point you raised tangentially.
Yeah.
Tampa would have had a lot of players
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
Maybe as many as 10. So how would they come back competitively compared to an NHL team that only sent 1 or 2 players, right? One team tired, banged up, another team rested on the beach. I've always speculated that if you took a vote of the NHL players and all 170 that go to the Olympics said, no, we don't want to go, it would pass 530 to 170 because the other 530 players would like to have 2 weeks off in the middle of the season.
Yes.
It doesn't work for the competitiveness of our season. Precisely for that reason.
The only thing I would say in argument to that is the Detroit Red Wings, Steve Yzerman in 2002, I think they had 11 guys.
Yeah.
And they won the cup, and Yzerman did it on one leg. Like, that was one of the most incredible.
What year was that?
2002.
And where were they?
They were in Salt Lake City.
Oh, so the travel was a lot less. And by the way,
Florida, Salt Lake City, you can't get there direct. You have to take connection.
By the way, it's consistent with the travel that we do in the course of the season. And you know what? When you have an Olympics in North America, whether it's Vancouver or Salt Lake City, it maybe changes the equation a little bit. There's less wear and tear. There's more attention, time zones. You know, last night there was a semifinal game on for the Olympics. 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. The other semifinal game was on at 7:30 in the morning. And for the 2 semifinal games, we're going to give up 3 weeks of regular exposure and a presence in our buildings. And what time is the gold medal game on Saturday night?
It's at 11 p.m. Eastern.
Is it 11 p.m. or later?
11 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
It's against one of our games.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Okay. Analytics. Actually, I want to talk to you about technology. You have tested periodically.
Yep.
I remember years ago, John Collins, who was in the previous panel, said one of the things that made it difficult was the chip and the puck cost $200. And there is a tradition in hockey, the puck goes into the crowd, the fan gets to keep the puck, it's a great souvenir, and you didn't want to have to take pucks away from people because they were so expensive. Now I understand.
No, that's not why we didn't do it.
Oh, it was a story I was told.
Well, you know, it's an apocryphal.
But you, I understand now it's more cost effective. You tested it at the All-Star game. How close are we getting to the player tracking?
We're getting close to player and puck tracking. I'm hopeful, if not for the playoffs next season, the following season. We've tested it.
So playoffs in 19, you're thinking, or 20?
Maybe, but probably the next season.
Okay, 20. Okay.
First of all, we've been testing it using not necessarily chips on players, which they just did in the Olympics, and got some primitive data. We have some camera video that we can use for the players, and we've actually worked with the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany to reinvent the puck, because the, quote, $200 puck wasn't really a pure puck. And if you remember the Fox track puck going back 20 some odd years ago, to make that work, we had to take a regular puck, saw it in half, dig out the guts, put in the technology, glue it back together, and sometimes it exploded and came apart. That wasn't it. We have a new chemical composition for our puck, and a puck that is fully sealed and integrated and performs exactly the way our current puck does. We're testing that. We worked to test all this technology at the World Cup. We've done it at All-Star games. And the issue becomes now scalability, making sure it's reliable and then having it in 31 buildings for 1,271 games and having it work everywhere. And that's what's taking the time to do it. But we are committed to getting it done because we think, particularly with the speed of our game, to have that mining of incredible data will bring fans closer to the game and give the hockey people some more stuff to work with.
Are the players on board? That has been an issue. Oh, sorry, you had something you wanted to say.
No, why don't you finish that? I was going to talk analytics.
Okay.
You can finish that.
Are the players on board at times?
You know, it's something that we talk to the Players Association about. It's something we believe we have the right to do, but more importantly, we want their cooperation. We want them to understand what we're doing. We're not planning on putting chips on the players, so that shouldn't be an issue. At the end of the day, anything that can help grow the game, anything that can bring our fans closer to the game. And by the way, one of the things that we're insisting on doing is having technology that can be integrated into a broadcast in real time.
Yep.
And nobody's been able to do that yet. And so we're optimistic that this is all going to come together in the not too distant future and we'll be ready for prime time.
Yeah, I was going to talk about analytics since that might have some relevance today. We do use, like all teams these days, analytics are part of our evaluation with our hockey program and with our business side too. Frankly, more on the business side than the hockey side. When we look on the hockey side, analytics is one of the tools that we use. It is not the be-all, end-all, especially in a game like hockey, which is so fluid. We look at things like not only how a player does and what some of his stats are, Corsi, scoring chances for, against, but what that player does depending on who he has on the ice with him. And it gets, as you can imagine, it gets very complicated very quickly. We get, with all due respect, we get excited sometimes when we see teams that are putting all their chips in on analytics. We don't believe that's a good strategy. We believe that the scouts do have a purpose. We are paying them for a reason, and we try to treat them well for a reason. We think doing good, deep research has a purpose, and we think analytics has a purpose, but we take it with a grain of salt, and that's different from other sports. Baseball is a lot different than is hockey. So it is part of what we do. It is important. We keep trying to get better at it and testing different ways, but we're careful.
I agree with Jeff. I think particularly in our sport, analytics can be more of a guidepost, but how important chemistry is, how important the room is, how guys relate to each other and deal with each other. And that and it's about heart, and it's about head as much as it is, if not more than data.
It's an emotional game, there's no question.
That's a great point. And as long as you mentioned the trading deadline, that's one of the things we think about. We don't, and any time we're re-signing a guy or bringing in a guy, we think of character, we think of the way he's going to fit in the room, we think of the way he's going to play with other players. Very good point.
What's the biggest difference between owning a baseball team and owning a hockey team?
Well, I love hockey. I can't go to 162 games a year, but I certainly can go to 60 games and watch the other 22. So, if truth be known, as you say, the night before I stayed up and watched the U.S. The women's, the game against Canada. So it was up till 2 in the morning that night. Last night I was in New York and I had tickets to see Frozen, with the premiere of Frozen with my family. So then I got home that night late. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. But they got it. It's not the real premiere. It's like the premiere of the preseason.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
So I got home at 11 o'clock, and of course I record. What I do is I record the games if I can't make them live, and I don't let anybody tell me the score. I don't check my phone. Anyway, I got home at 11 o'clock. I watched 3/4 of the first period, and then I fell asleep, and I missed the rest of the game. It's the second game I've missed in 8 years. I mean, there was one in San Jose, we lost 6-0, and I gave up on that one in the first period. So I guess I love hockey. I may not answer the question.
One of the things one owner said to me was, before I owned a sports team, I was in business, I was very successful, and no one cared. Nobody knew who I was never in the paper, nobody wanted to talk to me, I could do much more important things than I do as an owner of a sports team, but I could do them privately. He said, the minute I bought a team, I was public. People ripped me more than ever before. People questioned my kids at school more than they ever did before. They could not believe. And he said, what I do in business is 10 million times more important than what I do owner of a sports team. He had real trouble adjusting to that. Did you have that?
I disagree with so much of what you just said there. First of all, for me, I was in the investment business my whole life, which is blinders on and private. Although running Magellan Fund here in Boston, I did get publicity for that. More importantly, what we are doing with the Tampa Bay Lightning is orders of magnitude more important than what I did running Vinik Asset Management. We ran up to $10 billion of hedge fund assets for foundations and endowments, so for good causes. But the impact that we try to have on a community, which is part of our mission statement, is just so much more important than what in my opinion, what I was doing before. I went from being a very private person to being a much more public person. I have learned, and fortunately, the press in Tampa, it's not Toronto, let's just say, and we've had
some people would say that's fortunate, not unfortunate. Yes.
And we've had generally pretty good news. We've had ups and downs along the way. But, I put blinders on. I worry about privacy with my family. But otherwise, I try to be a community leader. I try to help the community. I try to use that to make Tampa a better place.
You know, we danced around this a little bit, so let me be more specific on one point.
Okay.
In September, the NHL and 16 other hockey organizations worldwide came together and announced a common declaration of principles, the values that we believe our game represents and that we're going to promote: inclusiveness, hard work, teamwork, physical fitness, leadership, cooperation. And those are the things that we think, particularly for young people, can make a difference in their lives, whether or not they become fans. And that's something that all of us associated with the game are very proud of.
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's no question the younger generation is very socially aware on Twitter, on social media, and you know, you mentioned Florida. What those children are doing is incredible.
Yep.
You know, as a league now, how much responsibility do you feel that you have to keep up with it, and how worried are you about missteps, whether intentional or unintentional, that get in the way?
Whether or not it's Hockey Fights Cancer, Hockey is for Everyone, the programs we do in schools with STEM, I mean, we think we have a platform that can be very effective in working in communities, being a part of the community, and making a difference in people's lives. It's something that at the league level and all of our franchises, ownership is committed to doing, and we have tons of programs. This is Hockey is for Everyone month. I think we have 80 different events going on throughout North America, which really speaks to hockey being for everyone. So it's not about missteps, it's about trying to do good things.
But are both of you comfortable with players speaking out? Because hockey is conservative.
I think players speaking their hearts, being involved in the causes that are important to them when they're not playing the game, because when they're playing the game, we'd like them to be focused on playing the game. We think it's great. And lots of our players have their own foundations and have their own charitable causes, and we think that's great.
You know, just an example, after Hurricane Irma hit Florida, we, the Panthers, and the NHL, and was the PA involved?
Yes, I think so.
I think the PA was involved. We got together and we gave a significant amount of money to help those who were in dire need at the time.
Yeah.
You signed a contract extension, I think around the Nashville All-Star game, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember. I said, no, seriously, I don't pay attention to it.
Okay, I remember it was reported.
I give my pay stubs to my wife, and I just move along.
Okay.
It is what it is.
I always said you were a smart man. I was reported around then. I don't know when.
You would know. You approved it.
I don't remember it either, actually.
You guys tend to be more focused on that than we are, but
Well,
that's okay.
I do
Okay,
wonder-
I'm doing this for a while.
Okay, yes.
We can agree on that.
It's 25 years.
We signed you on for 25 more years?
Yeah, well,
Do you see a day where you're not doing this anymore?
you know, no. I love what I do. I'm energized. It's as good, if not better, than anything else I could do to recreate. And it's not a recreation, it's a full-time job, it's a lifestyle. But when at some point, you reach an age, thank you for making me feel old, but at some point you reach an age where, you probably don't have the same fastball. And at that point, you have to recognize that you need to not keep doing something that's this important, this visible, and this complicated. But I don't foresee that. I continue to be energized and excited by what I do. You know, it's funny. I know in February 1st, everybody, particularly in your line of work, was making a big deal about 25 years. It doesn't seem like 25 years. It seems like the blink of an eye. The only way I mark the time, you tend to mark time through your children. Mm-hmm. So my youngest child, who's 29, last month had a baby, okay? And I put it in context that she was 4 years old when I started doing this, okay? That's the only timing that really affects me. I'll continue to do this as long as the owners will have me, and I'm energized to do what I do.
Okay, we got 2 minutes left, so here's the last thing I want to ask you. Jeff, when the day comes you eventually sell the Tampa Bay Lightning.
No plans.
No, I wasn't going to ask that. What's the most important thing that you want people to say about you?
I don't want to sell the team. I can't conceive of that day. Let's start off with that. I think we want to make Tampa a better place.
I knew you were going to say that, and that's the right answer.
And Commissioner, when the time
trained me
does
well.
come,
Oh, no,
when the time does come where you move on and spend time with your grandchildren, what's the most important thing you want people to say about you?
I hope that particularly for the people that knew me and worked with me, that he was a good person. And for everybody else, they'll say, you know what, we didn't agree with everything he did, but in the final analysis, the game's stronger and bigger and better because of his being there.
The last thing I wanted to ask you was,
I thought
your
we were
job.
done.
No, I just thought of it because I was listening to you say that. Is it possible to be beloved in that job?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I really don't care. My job isn't to be beloved. My job is to make the game of hockey as strong as possible.
Okay. Let's take some questions. I know that there were some sent here. Okay.
It's technology.
Growing up in
You know, we have iPads on the benches also.
Yes. Dan Bilesma this morning was talking about how Sidney Crosby always looks at his shifts while he's sitting there.
It's a great collaboration that we have with Apple.
Growing up in Tampa, there were 2 rinks. Now they are all over town, coached by Lightning alumni. How important was growing the hockey community to the team's success?
It's everything. First of all, there is a premise that I come with, and that is hockey is such a great sport. Every single person in Tampa Bay should be a Lightning fan and should be an NHL fan because it's a fantastic sport. And our mission is to make that happen. We may not quite get there, but we want to make that happen. In conjunction with the NHL, again, and the PA and the Lightning, we have put several $1 million, $6 or $7 million behind growing the game of hockey for youth in the Tampa Bay area. In the last 2 seasons, we have given out 70,000 sticks and hundreds of sets of hockey equipment to 4th and 5th graders in our area. That is one of many programs we have going on. Everybody should love this sport, and we got to grow the game. That's what we're about.
And it's not unique. I mean, Jeff, as we've discussed, has done an incredible job in Tampa. The Samuelis own the Ducks in Anaheim. I think when they took over the team, there was 1 high school team, and I now think they preside over a league of 48 high school hockey teams in Orange County.
I remember, too, actually, we were doing an event where the first player from Texas was ever drafted. I believe it was David, or it was the first player from Texas who ever played for the Stars. I think his name was David McKee. He was a goalie, and I remember how proud you were.
Well, how about Austin Matthews? He will tell you if it wasn't for the Coyotes in Arizona, he wouldn't be playing hockey.
You know, I always say that that is going to go down as one of your greatest victories, that the kid from Arizona saved the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Okay.
Let's end it there. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the questions. Hope you all enjoyed it.